to
Oh,
start
yeah.
recording, because sometimes people cannot join live and they watch these after.
Right.
So it's nice to see you. I don't know who else is going to show up.
Okay.
Let me hide my self view because I don't like to see myself. There
I
we
know, me too. It's far too distracting.
go. I know it is very distracting.
There we go.
So as we wait for a few more people to show up, I wanted to ask, so, as you probably saw the emails yesterday that started with the new launch, and I wanted to say to people who are owners of practices that I'm going to offer the
Yeah.
um, institution, I mean, the private practice rate, the practice rate, if there's
Mhm.
people joining. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, I feel like we've been so involved with all that's going on in the world this week that I haven't talked to them yet, but it's on my agenda to bring it up to folks. I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, this launch is coming at a very bad time.
Yes, it is. I'm impressed with your fortitude, I have to say.
Well, I have to say it has kept me sane.
Yeah.
It's just it's been incredibly. One thing I couldn't do is do the phone banking. So I had told myself that I was committed to doing the phone banking in Spanish because I speak Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel very, very guilty that I ended up not doing that. Um, Hi, everyone. I'm talking about my guilt about not doing phone banking because I'm doing Academy for Couples Therapist stuff instead. So it is keeping me sane. And anyway, welcome everyone. As people are trickling in, as you know, some of the people, if you can mute yourself. So I'm going to talk a little bit while I talk. You can please mute yourselves. There you go. Thank you. As we get people trickling in, I want to talk a little bit about, what's coming up in the Academy. I wanted to mention, like I said, that I started the launch, and I wanted to say that I want to just ask you about how I want you to have an opportunity to talk about the module. So, as we go month to month, we go module 1, module 2. This is module 2 meeting. And, but I also want to talk about how not so much how the content is organized, because I don't think I can change too much about that, but I might be able to change the way I communicate with you. I know that you're all members of the groups IO and you get my messages, and I just wanted to tell you that today, I believe in the last couple of days, you got a new logging information. So hopefully you got that. I asked my assistant to resend it because some of you couldn't find it. The second thing I wanted to tell you is that, well, now I lost my train of thought. I had a prior supervision meeting before this meeting, so I wasn't totally prepared for what I wanted to tell you in the beginning. I was just talking about asking your feedback, not so much about the content, but about the communication mostly, and about you know about how the website is organized, like, and just hoping that you can give me some feedback on that. Um, so in month 3, you're going to be getting hopefully some new people subscribing to the Academy. So the new month will launch November 11th, I believe. So usually it launches at about in the middle of the month. And the next Zoom meeting for month 3 will be December 4th. And the office hour for month 3, or I should call it module 3, will be December 16th at 2 p.m. So December 4th at 11 and December 16th at 2 p.m. for the office hour. And the office hour for module 2 is Tuesday, the 17th at 8 p.m. So all those dates, I added some information on the website with the permanent links, so you don't have to scramble. You can always go to the website now and see the permanent links for both the office hour and the Zoom call. And what's coming up in the lessons, I believe in month 4, I have theory integration in the developmental model with some tools derived from it. And in month 5, you'll hear the systemic frameworks and the solution focused model. And I haven't decided if I'm going to put the narrative therapy model in the same lesson or if I'm going to wait to month 6 for that. And then Gottman comes on month 6. And on month 7, you'll have EFT and on and on. So every month you'll get a different framework with a lesson with a different framework with the tools derived from it. And the other new thing is I've added a toolbox to the website. So now when I mention, hopefully when I mention something in a session, or when I mention an exercise in the frameworks, sometimes I'll be able to put that in the toolbox. So, okay, I think that's, well, I want to reiterate for some of you who may not have heard that in module 1, when we had our meeting a month ago, that the PDFs that come with the lessons are a summary of the audio of the lesson so that you can follow along with it. But I want to point out that at the end of all the PDFs, and I actually want some feedback about that, I have implementation tasks. So you all hopefully read the stages of success, stages of development of a couples therapist on month 1 when you joined, and hopefully you can see that the implementation tasks on the PDF are geared towards your different stages. So if you're in stage 1, if you're in stage 1 or 2, I have some ideas about what you can do. And if you're in stage 3 or 4 or 5, I have some ideas about what you can do. I doubt that anybody is completely in stage 6 all the time. So, and we go back and forth, as you know. Anyway, so I actually want, that would be my first question. I want to hear if you've been able to see those implementation tasks, if they're helpful, if you like to see them there, or if it's a waste of my time, because it's not an easy thing to do for me to get those ready every month. Let's see, how do we do this? Whoever wants to say something, just raise your hand and you can, okay, Therese, why don't you unmute yourself and say what you're thinking about that?
Yeah, I really like the implementation activities because I think they really help with kind of, putting into action what you're already sharing about. And it causes me to think about it more in regard to my own clients.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for saying that. Anybody else wants to say, Carolyn?
Yeah, I also agree that they're very helpful. I feel especially that, as you just said, like I fall between different stages at different times and with different pieces of it. And so it's been really helpful to help sit down and organize. I cannot say that I've done them all yet, given the world at the moment, but I'm really looking forward to, and it's provoked good thinking about how I think about this. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you for saying that, Carolyn. I want to say that one other piece about this is that one of my biggest fears is that the material will overwhelm you. And so I am trying to drip content in a way that I hope you can consume and doesn't overwhelm you, which is why I'm thinking for month 4, instead of doing systemic, solution focused and narrative, to do narrative and Gottman the next month, so that it's not so much. Otherwise, it will be like a 45-minute audio of a lesson, and I think that's too long. So I just wanted to tell you that's what part of what I'm doing. I'm creating the content for the first year, and I'm trying to drip it so that it doesn't overwhelm you. So when you said, Carolyn, I don't know that I've done it yet. I'm like, okay, don't worry, don't feel pressure. Just take it, see what you can get from it, and it's okay. We're all busy, and this is one more thing we have to do. So if it helps you to think about it, that's great. Anybody else wants to say something about the implementation tasks?
Hi, I was just looking back trying to see the stages, and I'm not seeing that in module 1 anymore. Wasn't it a separate PDF that had the stages in it?
Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. The creation of the website is another issue. So let me, I'm going to send them to you again. You have them in the first welcome email. And the reason I took them out is because new people who join now on November 11th are going to not, let's see, why isn't it? It should be in the resources tab though.
It is in the resources. I found it last night.
Oh, okay. It should be in the resources. Okay, good. Thank you. I'm going to check to make sure it's there. So it's in the resources.
you.
You're welcome. Okay, so unless somebody else has some direct feedback, Laura, did you want to say anything?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Unless somebody else has something to say about the implementation tasks or anything about the structure, I want to move on to talking about our topic for today, which is the module 2 session in lessons. So I guess I'm gonna just take questions or comments. And Sharon, I cannot see you, so I don't know. I'm assuming you can hear us. But I can't see you, just your video.
Sorry, I had the video off, yeah, so.
Did you have any questions or comments? How do you want to structure this call?
I can give you a couple of questions on my part. I don't know if people have questions. Maybe the first one is, sometimes in the beginning, working with a couple, I find that translation may be required. It comes up at one point in the audio of your session, but I'd be interested in hearing how you work yourself out of that role. I sometimes get pulled into translating for the couple for any number of reasons. Maybe one person is saying something the other doesn't really hear or doesn't understand, or one of them has difficulty digging deeper into feelings to express the real issues going on, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want to be in the position of translator, and indeed, I don't think I should be for the health of the couple. So again, wondering how you work yourself out of that role, which I gather from your comments in the audio, you don't think you should be in either, ultimately.
Thank you for the question. I'd love to collect questions. So I'm gonna wait a little bit and see what else you have. I'm assuming that you heard the lesson, the audio. I realize that there are problems with it, so I'm gonna have to fix them. Anyway, I just wanted to say I have editing issues. So one of the things I want to insert in that module 2 audio of the session is that at some point I say, I transition from what, the session is edited. So it's edited not to take a lot of things out, but There's a one point where I transitioned from whatever it is I'm talking about to, oh, I want to hear more about the fights. And I didn't say anything about how I got there. So I might have to say that to make the transition a little less abrupt. But anyway, can you give me your questions? I would love to hear more questions. Ruby?
Yeah, so my question is in terms of how do you space out the individual sessions between the couples? Because like currently I have one because they're high conflict, which it requires it honestly to get them to really share. So I wanted to know, is there like a specific time frame I should consider? Like, is it every week that you see one or the other, or can you see them both in the same week just on a different day? Does it matter? So that was one of my questions.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any others? Anybody else? Monica, go ahead.
I appreciated whenever after you had individual sessions with each of them, and then you were talking about things in the session with them, you would ask the question, is there any part of that you are interested in, or that you appreciate, like as a way of not asking them necessarily their opinion about it, but are you interested in that? Which I found really, really helpful. And the thing that I think I found helpful about it is that it's a way of bringing up a topic and possibly some accountability, but without like yet confrontation about it. And I think at least that's what I was thinking when I heard it. And then I was just wondering about when there is something that comes up that feels like it requires more confrontation, like, is that the point that you go ahead and do that? Or do you sort of make note of it and then go on later? And because I mean, sometimes the confrontation is important, but I didn't know if, I was just sort of wondering about your process with that.
Thank you. Therese, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was thinking about how you interrupt them and how how you kind of set that up, like this is what's going to need to happen. And I've been working with couples for almost 10 years, but I find that I still have issues where I have the whole speech about this is what's going to happen, but I feel like I have to have it more than like several times. Do you find that? And, do you feel like you have to reword it in different ways?
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Carolyn?
When I was looking at specifically the lesson, and it talks about assessing for whether or not couples therapy is indicated.
Oh, sorry, Laura.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what are some of the things specifically that you're assessing at that time to see if it's a good idea for the couples therapy?
Okay. These are all amazing questions. Did you say, Carolyn, you had a question?
I did, yeah. No,
Okay.
mine is somewhat piggybacking on what Monica was asking as well. I think it's complicated when we're going in and out of the individual sessions and into couples. And so I'm interested also to hear how you think about whether you do it sort of systematically always, at the beginning of the work together, or when there are times to take it out otherwise. And I think there are many ways people talk about this, but sort of when someone tells you something that they then don't want you to say with the other person, what do we do with that? And the desire for people to keep secrets.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so before I try to delve into the questions, I want to ask you if you could do like a 1-sentence comment about the ways in which so far this has helped you, this material, the ways in which it's helping you. And I guess a follow-up question with that is, how is your professional self-esteem going? So one of the things that I learned from my supervisors, my clinical supervisors, is that, and I think I mentioned it the first month, that when my clinical supervision about a case was very helpful, my professional self-esteem went down. And so I am always checking with my supervisees about how they're feeling about getting exposure to the material. Are you feeling like, oh my God, there's so much I don't know? Are you feeling like, oh, this is great? Are you, or anything in between? I think I want to be talking about that because the ways in which you approach, that actually gets into shame-based reaction, and it gets into whatever self-esteem issues we have, just how to work with self-esteem issues. And I just want to know, if you can make a comment about that so that you can get, I'm hoping you can get some support from the group when your self-esteem goes down, or from me. So the first thing is a one sentence comment about what you're learning or getting, or how this is helping you, and a one sentence comment about your self-esteem. Up or down, same, no effect. Okay, I'm going to ask each of you. Jacques, you want to go first? Okay, go ahead. Unmute yourself, please.
How's that?
Great.
I think the area that I've been helped in most is to learn to slow down and, not jump in as much. And I think the stabilization period of the first model has been very helpful. Right? Self-esteem is fine. It's probably because of my age, but
that helps.
I think that I still feel a deep humility for this work, and really want to know that I need to learn a lot more, and that's why I'm here. So that's it.
Thank you. Ruby, you want to go next? Unmute.
Yeah, for me, I think what's been helpful is setting the stage for first session. So I really appreciated the second module you shared with the guidelines or the best practices, because I was really over analyzing, like, did I do a good job with kind of setting up the stage with the clients that I was seeing? And I was happy to see that I did attack some of those main goals. In terms of self-esteem, I think if I do like a scale 1 to 10, I feel like I'm at a 6, but it just depends on the issue the couple is coming with and how I handle like their different personalities and how to set those boundaries. And then part of, the other group that you have on Facebook, that last consultation you had really helped with some of the questions I was thinking in my mind with one of the last sessions I had. I said, oh, okay, I thought about that. So I think it's kind of helping me feel a little more confident in the approach that I'm taking. And like Jacques said, not trying to go too fast or trying to solve the problems, more so just really learning how to have them have a dialogue, which is really what they're not having right now.
Right, thank you. Therese, you want to go next? Unmute.
Sure. I am learning a lot about structuring better my beginning and end of my sessions, and that's been really helpful. And I would say that, it was like Ruby said, on a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, I guess I would be around an 8. And really, I tend to lean in when I feel like, oh, I need to know more about this. So when it's tough, I lean in.
Thank you. Laura, unmute.
This not just the well, a combination of both the meetings that we're having as well as the audios. It's helping me to increase ideas of how to approach the actual process of doing therapy. You know, because I've gotten a lot of suggestions as to how to handle specific situations as they arise. So that's been very helpful. And for me, all of this, it actually increases my self-esteem because I'm returning after a while and I'm feeling like, what am I doing?
Oh, great, great. Thank you. Monica?
Yeah, so a little bit of the same. What has been really helpful for me is this sense of how to sort of structure and organize what I'm going to do and sort of to make the space for that and not feel like, because usually when they come in, they want to, at least one of them wants to start right away telling you everything, their whole side. And so, and I a lot of times have that's what's happened, but to be able to know, no, this is, you know, there's a structure and this, and to have more authority over it has been really helpful for me. And I think as far as self-esteem, I think I've been, I mean, in general, like I have weeks where it's higher or lower depending on how client sessions go. But I think in particular with one couple, I felt my self-esteem, I think, was a little bit higher. They were a high conflict. And it's been really tough to get them to not fight, but then also to say, what is this therapy doing? And for me to be able to, I think you said this in, I can't remember at what point I heard this from you, but it was some point in one of the last 2 lessons that the work, like they do the work during the week, like the work, I mean, it is work in therapy, but that's not the primary work. The primary work is them during the week. And so for a moment, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I thought, no, I am giving them tools. This is for them to work on during the week. So that was actually helpful for my self-esteem. So
Great, thank you. Sharon?
I would say this has helped with building more confidence and giving me ideas for doing differently, referencing kind of the structure and organization that Monica and Therese were talking about. Helps me feel like I'm not just winging it. I had just one course in couple therapy, plus a seminar and my own reading, but this gives me a lot more. Seeing how you handle sessions is just so instructive. And as far as my self-esteem, maybe it bounces around a little, like, you know, at one moment I'm saying, oh gosh, I should have figured that out or something, but or known that, but I'd say mostly kind of neutral.
Thank you, Sharon. I think Carolyn is the only one left. Yeah.
Yeah. I've really appreciated the way that you've pulled out all the different things to think about as you structure the arc of the whole, like the series of sessions. And that's been really helpful to me to think about that more. I feel like I feel sometimes like I practice very intuitively because I've been practicing a long time, and it's good to go back and think about why exactly am I doing A or B. So that's been great. And my self-esteem also, I feel like fine, kind of, I spend the rest of my week talking to students as well about how they're doing. And I feel like I'm always saying, oh, we make mistakes forever. So it feels pretty normal to continue to be in learning, I guess, forever, in a good way.
That's right. Thank you. Okay, now let me see if I can get to the questions then. Thank you so much for your comments. As you know, this is not an easy thing for me to do, to share with the world the way that I work. It's affected my self-esteem. Sometimes I think, oh, I did a good job here. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that was terrible. So, and I'm going to try to share with you the moments when I think were terrible too. So I'm going to try. I don't know. I have to find the balance between a good training session and one that that shows my own mistakes. So that's what I'm working towards. So I'm going to take the translation question first. So how do I work out of my role? So it's a very interesting question, as they all are, but this one in particular is making me think that I think, as so many of my answers, it will be, it depends. So sometimes severely conflict avoidant couples who haven't talked about anything for such a long time need a lot of translation help for a very long time. And I get, because sometimes I'm thinking in particular about one couple that I've said to myself, I've been working with them for 1.5 years. They ought to be able to do this already. And the fact that they're not doing it means that either A, I'm not doing the right thing, or B, they're not doing the right thing. So I'm constantly thinking about that. And I actually supervised this case. And I did a consultation with one of my colleagues. I consulted about it, and my colleague said, they can't. They can't. They still can't. So you have to help them for as long as they can. And so, how do you measure progress? It might be a good way, a good different way of thinking about it, that for them, progress is that I translate 2 times in a session as opposed to 10. Maybe that's what progress is for them. But I want to, so but specifically, how do I get myself out of the role? I do work on that too. And what I do is I begin to talk with the couples about how to measure progress. And I say, what do you think needs to happen that will tell you things are better between you? I mean, this is one of my very, very standard questions. And I actually want them to tell me when we can talk without you, when we can say things to each other without needing to get a translator. And so with this particular couple, the one that you heard actually, I think you heard the 3rd session. No, you heard the first one and the one after the individuals. They were practicing. So I give them dialogue tools, which I don't remember if I put it in the toolbox yet, but I have a dialogue tool. I think every therapist should have a dialogue tool, and I give them and I practice it in session, and I tell them, we're going to practice this here. And I would like to know if you want to do an experiment and practice this at home. And one way that I ask them to practice is with a small topic. So don't bring up the big topics, the sexual desire discrepancy topics, or the different political views topic, or the topics of, how much one hurt the other way back when the baby was born. I mean, I tell them specifically not to do that, but I say practice it with a little thing you're thinking about that you decide that in the past you would have not wanting to address, and think about how to address it now. So one of the couples that actually you're going to hear brought up, anyway, it doesn't matter. One of the couples, I did this, with small things, and then I got them to talk about bigger things, and then I got them to experiment at home without me. So that's kind of how I get to it. Daniel Weil, who is, he just died actually, who is an amazing couples therapist. He's the creator of collaborative couples therapy. I'm thinking about including his work in our frameworks, but I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet. He did a lot. I mean, that was his signature intervention, the translation. And so he wasn't uncomfortable with it at all. He called it doubling down. And he would say, he would literally come, move his chair to the side of one of the clients and repeat what the client was saying, but in a different way. So he thought of his role as a doubling down role, as a translator role. And I don't know if he ever transitioned out of it. I do try to transition out of it if they can. I'm gonna leave that question and move on to the next one, unless you have a comment or a follow-up question to what I just said.
Sorry, Sarah, I just wanted to ask, the dialogue tools, you mean like something like the speaker listener technique?
Yeah, absolutely. That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, okay. So Ruby, I want to go back to your question. Do I space out individual sessions? I think the main way of answering that is that it depends on their budget and their time availability. So one way of doing it is to have one joint. Let's say it's a heterosexual couple, one individual with a male, and then another joint to summarize and review, and then another individual with a female, and then another joint to summarize and review. Now that's one model. I actually prefer one joint, two individuals with one, and then another joint, and then two individuals, and then another joint. I don't have it. Usually it's not enough to have one individual. So I usually need two. One, to get to know them better and develop the issues from their point of view and empathize with them, especially if I've lost some empathy for one of them. To get to know them better, to get curious, to really get into what's going on. In the second session, I need to be able to help them identify what they want their partner to know about what we talk about. So to identify, or what I think they need to be telling their partner. Usually it's about acknowledgement, usually it's about owning, usually it's about accountability, usually it's about the way that they showed up. And so that's what I try to do. And it depends on the budget and the timing. So if they can do 2 sessions a week and they can afford it, great. And I have room in my schedule, I do it. Otherwise, it's just once a week. Any comments or follow-up questions about that?
No, thank you. I just wanted to know, because I did like two a week. So, but that was the preference. And I said, okay, or we can wait. But, you know, I think there's just so much going on that's probably where they're like, I don't care. I need some vitamin attention too.
Right.
So.
Sometimes you need to do CPR. So Monica, your question was not yet confrontation, and when do I do that? And you were, this was a follow-up to what I did in the session, which was, I don't usually, I mean, that was a creative moment I had about, do you think it's interesting? Do you think what I'm talking about with her is interesting? I don't usually, you know, I don't know. I mean, I learned from that creative moment that that's a good question, actually. But I don't know that I do. So, yeah, I think the answer is that I file things away. I think about, and sometimes I tell them what I think we're going to have to do in the future, but we're not doing it yet. So for example, in specifically with the case that you heard, I don't think you heard that part, but at one point I did say to her, you don't tell him that you need a break for yourself. You don't tell him that. I think I talk about her not initiating, but I don't tell her specifically what it is that I think she needs to be initiating about. but I anticipate you may want to initiate about, time for yourself. You may want to initiate about how overwhelmed you are. You tend to be so even keeled that you don't tell him what's going on with you, both the good and the bad. But we're not going to do that yet. So sometimes I do it that way. Because I say, I don't know you well yet. I don't know what you're going to have to do differently. I know you're going to have to do something differently, but I don't know yet what it is. So that's how I phrase the filing away of what needs to happen. For him, it was very clear, like how do what, and I think I did mention that to him in my individual session is, if you can't ignore her, what you heard her say, I don't like it when I feel pressure. And I don't like it when every touch is about that. And I get it that part of it is because there's so few and far between that when you do start touching, you want, you get so aroused that you want her to, go there. However, you're also listening to what she's saying and you're hearing that that's not working for her. So what are you going to do instead? So, or I'll say, we'll talk about what you will be doing instead of that. That for her to feel pressure is not going to work. So what we will in the future talk about what you can do instead. So yes, I file away, or I begin to anticipate what we'll be talking about. And there's several ways of confronting clients. Some of it is directly. I also do what's known as an indirect confrontation. And an indirect confrontation is talking to one partner about the other. So for example, I'll say to her, obvious, depending on my alliance, if I don't have a very strong, in this case, I had a very strong alliance with him from the get-go because I addressed the reasons why he was getting ready to leave the marriage. He was actually, I don't think you can tell that from the beginning, but he was ready to leave. He was really, I think he answered it in the questionnaire. I have thoughts about divorce, or he said something in the very beginning. Something made me say, if I don't address his issue and I don't increase his level of hope very early on, this guy is not going to stick with this. And so, so I did, but an indirect confrontation what may have been with her, which I may have done, to say to her, well, obviously, one of the things you're hoping that will change between the two of you is that you feel that he pressures you to have sex whenever he touches you. I mean, that's an indirect confrontation. That's a message for him. And he's hearing it. And I know he's hearing it. So I may go back to that and say, well, what did you hear me say to her? Or what do you think about what I said to her? But it's all about trying to begin to elicit what is going to become the individual change goal. That's what Ellen Bader calls a soft confrontation, which is an indirect confrontation. When you talk to one member of the couple, but the message is actually for the other. Okay, any comments or questions about that before I move on to Teresa's question about interrupting? Okay, so I'll move to Teresa's question. We're moving right along here. Your question, Teresa, was about, I believe, if I understood it correctly, that how often do you reword and how often do you bring up, again, a whole spectrum of things several times? And I'm going to say the short answer is all the time. And so if I have a good alliance and I really work on that, and by that I mean they each have to believe that I'm on their side. They each have to think that I get them. They each have to know that I can help them. All of those are constitute an alliance. And if I do have it, which I don't always, I will say things like, well, what do you think I'm going to say now? What just happened? What do you think I'm going to say? And speaking about the that's the other problem with the way I'm structuring the academy. So you're listening to my style. You're hearing the way I work. But that may be very different than the way you work, and it's all right. I am very, very direct, very to the point. Some couples like that, some people don't, and I have actually lost some clients because they don't like that. Unlike so many couples therapists, I'm not afraid of confrontation, and sometimes I go overboard and don't do a good job because I overdo it. I'm hoping I can show you some of that eventually. I don't know. So people who work with me, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and I have the gamut, they'll say, I was about, so I amplify. So what's different? What's better? And they'll say, well, we almost had a fight, but we didn't, let's say. And I'll say, well, what did you tell yourself? How did you do it? What happened? And they'll say, well, I heard your voice. Now that's both a good thing and a bad thing. Hearing my voice is part of what it's good to replace a shaming voice with a protective voice. But, they said, I heard your voice telling me not to go there. Or I heard your voice telling me this is not going to be constructive. Or I heard your voice telling me that having a good dialogue would be anxiety produced. Who knows what they heard. And so that, to me, that means that they are learning. And so sometimes I repeat myself. Sometimes I will say, what do you think I'm going to say? Sometimes I say, well, this is not very productive. I don't want to go there. Let's change it. Let's, I don't like what's going on. Let me pause and think about what to do instead. So I do a number of things like that. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Did I answer your question, Therese?
You are. It's validating. I tend to be very direct too. So sometimes, depending on the alliance I have with them, I'll say, whoa, like you guys can do this without me.
Right, exactly. But I will add one more thing to what I was saying, which is that this is a concept that I'm hoping. So when people get to this more advanced stages in their treatment process, when they get better, they have relapses. They have regressions. They progress and then they regress. So that happens all the time. And so that's when we have to say again and again and again, sometimes you have to go back to basics. So what is it that we're working on? What is it that you guys are here because why are you here? What's going on? So it's good to go back to you got to go back to the basics sometimes. But you go back to the basics, and the way I say it is that it's at a higher level. It's not the basic the way they came in when they first came in. You're at a higher level of their interactional pattern. They can see the pattern a little bit better. They understand it a little bit better. They have a platform to observe their pattern. They can say, this is me being me. They can say, if you're lucky, I mean, it doesn't always work that way. But if you're lucky, they can look at it from a different perspective. But going back to the basics is very, very common, very common. So Laura, when
Dr. Forsbaum, sorry, before you move on from
Sure.
Teresa's question, is there like a journey map or something that you can like show to a couple who's probably like lost hope and is trying to really envision or need something that a visual where they can be like, okay, you may progress. It may take a while to get to that progression piece, and then you may also regress a little bit, you or your partner. Is there any visual that you may have or have seen?
right,
Or
so
something about you can probably share with us later if you don't.
I have two thoughts on that. One is that in the very beginning of a treatment process, I do ask them for a vision of what their relationship will be like when it's better. And so I use those words and I send it in an email. So I ask them, and you'll see that in module, I can't remember now. You'll see that, I believe you'll see that in module 3. You'll see some of that in module 3, some of what I do in the beginning to create the vision for a future without a problem. And I know you'll see it again in when I talk about solution-focused therapy and narrative therapy. So what will you be doing when it's better? How will you be behaving? What would I see? I have a video talk. Like if I were in your house and I saw you, what would I see? And you saw me doing that with module 2. He couldn't answer the question, and I didn't let go. I pressed on and I said, what will you be doing? How will you be when things are better? When you have more sex, how will you be? He eventually said joyful. And I sort of let it go. I could have insisted a little more about what that would look like, but he had such a hard time saying joyful that I said that was great. I praised him and I said that's good enough for now. But I want a vision. I want a behavioral vision. So I also want words. So Gottman has what he calls the relationship house or something he calls it. And so I start with, I make a circle and I say, what is this relationship going to look like if it's better? And so they'll say things like, it will be more collaborative, we'll negotiate better, we'll have better dialogues, we'll respect each other, we'll be kinder, we'll be generous, we'll be friends, we'll have fun. I mean, you just begin to throw in the words, and then the clincher is the question, what is it going to require of you to try to get there, right? So that's the real question. That's the work of the couples therapy. But in terms of the vision, you want to have a vision and you want to remind them of their vision. And then you want to, every once in a while you remind them of their vision, or you resend that email, or you go back to that vision that you did in the first or second session. I often go back to first and second sessions when I'm stuck, just to see what I need to go back to. It's always about pushing them forward. Push them forward, even if you have to go back. And as the year continues, I'll talk more about how you go back. In fact, I think you'll see in module 4 some of what I do to go back. Did I answer?
Yeah, no, that was helpful. And I did pick up, I made notes of that when you did it in the session. And I do have the relationship house sample that we had like back in school. I saved a lot of that stuff, but I just couldn't remember how you organize it or how you present it. So it was perfect that you did that right now. So it was helpful when.
What will it be like when it's better? What will happen when it's better?
Yeah.
More sex, more fun, more talk, more this, more that.
Right. Yeah.
And how will you be when that happens?
Right. Yeah. No, so thank you. That was helpful. And I'm going to sign off because I have a 12 o'clock, but thank you everyone for everything that you shared today.
You're welcome.
All right, bye-bye.
Fine. So moving on, when is couples therapy indicated? Is that the question, Laura? How do I assess when couples therapy is indicated?
Right. As opposed to maybe sitting with a couple and thinking that it's better to not do couples therapy.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I could talk for an hour about that. Let me see. Right, and then we have the question about the secret that Carolyn asked, so I want to make sure we have time for both. I'm going to try to be brief about this because I just don't know how long we can talk about this for. Let see if you can frame the question again for me. So I'm having a little trouble framing the question. How do I know if it's indicated, or how do I talk to them about it? To ask the question again.
I'm trying to figure out how to assess when couples therapy is indicated. And with that, I'm thinking more of there's something that you're looking for to say it's better to do just individual sessions as opposed to couples therapy.
Okay, I got it now. Thank you. So, so what I'm looking for is their ability. So we're not talking about domestic violence or anything like that. I don't want to talk about that. But what I'm looking for is their ability to understand the impact of their behavior on their partner. Of their behavior, of their gestures, of their tone, of their, whatever it is. So that I have written in my forehead. I think you heard lesson 1 has some of my ideas about what helps relationship. Well, this is at the top. How aware are you of the impact of your behavior on your partner? That's at the top. And that's one of the main things I'm trying to assess. And so I'm going to give you an example. I think that after the first month, Sharon, I think you asked the question in the group. Well, yeah, the high conflict couple that you worked with were really open to your guidance and leadership. But what if you have a couple that is not? And it just so happened that either that day or the next day, I had a couple from hell. And so I think I emailed everyone and I told them I told you all what happened. It was a Friday afternoon and I was thinking to myself, I wish they were with a different therapist. I'm not good for, my self-esteem went completely down the tubes. Anyway, so I'm going to tell you what I did with them. So they were extremely reactive. She was screaming at me and at him. And he was screaming back. I mean, it was awful. So I said, you know what? This is not going to work. You can do this at home for free. And I want to, I want to meet with each of you individually. And, and I did that. And it turns out that he has a substance abuse issue, not surprisingly, and that she has a codependency issue, probably one of the worst I've ever seen. And so as a codependent, and again, I don't generally use that term because I prefer to use behavior to describe it. So what she'll do is she'll say things like, I know better than you that you need a vacation, so I'm going to go and renew the passports. And he's like, what? You're going to do what? I told you I don't want to travel. I told you I don't want you to do that. You can't do that without my permission. So that's just an example of the ways in which she believes that she has the illusion of control. She has the illusion of knowing what's best for him. She has absolutely no sense of self, and she has no sense of the ways in which she comes across to him, even though he's been screaming it at her for 20 years. And so I'm assessing that, and I said to her, this is what I literally said to her at the end of our second individual session. Actually, in the middle of it, I said to her, did you notice how hard it is for you to focus on yourself? When we focus on yourself, you talk about him. May I ask you not to talk about him? Can I ask you to talk about yourself? So that's one intervention I did. And if she continues not, so she goes back and does it. If she continues not to be able to do that, I worked with a couple that she couldn't do that. And I interrupted the couple's therapy and I said, I'm not going to be able to help you. But with her, back to the one I was telling you about, she's able to do that when I reel her back. And then I go back and forth between what my goals are with her and whether they are aligned with her goals. So I will say, do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this would be a good thing for you to work on? Do you think you want to be able to focus on taking care of yourself as opposed to taking care of him? And she'll say, yeah, that's what I need to do. Well, then you know you have the buy-in. So what I did with her, I recommended Al-Anon. I recommended Codependent No More book. I told her, and this is the way I work, that in this case, in order for me to even consider doing joint sessions again, she would have to commit to doing them. So I'm not going to say, I'm not going to work with you unless you do that, but I am going to say, do you think you can commit to doing that? Because if you don't commit to doing that, I'm not going to be very helpful. So, and she did. And so, and with him, I forgot what I asked him to commit to do. I don't think it was treatment because he wasn't there. But I think it was one of her main complaints, which is to work less and focus more on the relationship. So I went.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I do need to leave the meeting now, though. So, but even that was helpful for me to get a beginning idea of some of the things I need to be looking at to make sure that it's a good idea.
Yeah, and just real quick, I told him that the next joint session, I'm going to have one talk and the other one will be muted.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think we also, I don't think Teresa's here. Anyway, okay. So I want to move on to the last question, which is, Carolyn, this is a question about, what do you do with secrets? When I just want to make sure I get the question. It's what I do with secrets, and if you are seeing them individually, how do I systematize that so that I can deal with the issues of privacy or secrecy? Did I get that right?
But basically, I think it's almost actually two questions when you say it. The first one was just thinking about when to go back to individual sessions, because I sometimes feel like midstream, I think, oh, you're so upset with each other. I feel like you need a session by yourself to talk through how to talk to your partner in couples counseling. And I just would love your thoughts on that, because I feel like I'm erratic about it, And then separately, I think I've landed for myself on, I say, if we're talking individually, the goal is to bring it back to couples counseling, so that I'm not in the position of keeping a secret. But I've talked to people over the years, some of whom say I do keep secrets, and I think I've landed on it's too complicated for me, but I'm just interested in your thoughts. So they might be two things.
Right, okay. So the first one, when do I go back? It does depend on the case. You wouldn't be surprised to hear me say that. And I think that's one of the criteria. If they're too upset and they're too resentful and you feel like you need to deal with the resentment before they can come across in a little bit more, sometimes it's to organize their thought, help them organize. sometimes it's to deal with the resentment. Yeah, so and I'm going to say one more reason for seeing them individually in midstream. If you think that one of them is taking what they're hearing against the other. And I want to go a little deeper, and I want to do it not in front of the partner. So, and I don't know if it's only when I don't know if it's only when I think their partner is going to use it against them, but sometimes when I go deeper in therapy, and by deeper, I mean, I haven't talked about this with any of you yet, but when I go deeper, what that means is we go into family of origin, we go into patterns of reactivity and how they came about. We go into shame, we go into, all kinds of things. We go back, essentially. And sometimes going back in front of the partner is not possible. Either because the partner is going to use it against it, or because the client who needs to go back has a hard time admitting to himself or herself or their partner that there's been so much damage. So one case I'm working with, it's an infidelity case. And I had an individual session with him because he was not on board with the fact that when his mother died, when he was very young, that was traumatic for him. He was just not on board with the fact that when his mother died when he was 13, that was traumatic. He would not, I couldn't use that word with him because he didn't accept it. And so when I met with him individually, because his perception of himself, that this is the real interesting part, is that he was better than her, that she had all kinds of terrible childhood problems, and they moved 15 times and they were poor, and he was, he was a normal family. He was normal. So in his so I need to be able to switch his perception of himself, and that work needs to be done individually. I don't think I can do that work in front of her because he would never admit in front of her that something was wrong in his childhood. So I think that's the first part. Did I answer that first part about when do we go back? And maybe there's other times, but these are the couple that I can think of right now.
That's really helpful.
So because I'm always, let me just say one more thing, because I'm always thinking impact. What is the impact on her about this work that I want to do with him? So not only what is the impact on, what is the impact of this work on him, but what is the impact of this work on her? So I'm thinking, when I think that way, well, she sees him as perfect too. She thinks he's perfect too. So the work is to get at his vulnerability. That's what this is about. To get at his vulnerability, I need to be able to get at it without her present so that he can admit to it. And I need to then be able to share that with her so she can see that he's not perfect either. Anyway, that's just an example. The second part, the secret part, yeah, it's very muddled up and very complicated. And I don't know that I have a straight answer. I can tell you my struggles and I can tell you what I've done in the last few years. I have it in my informed consent, a permission to see them individually. And I say something so complicated that nobody can understand what I'm saying. It's true, and it's on purpose. because I want to be in charge of deciding. That's what I decided to do. I want to be in charge of deciding, is this something that she needs to reveal or is it not? Is this something, and so, but what I do say to people is that there are risks associated with individual sessions, that I believe the benefits outweigh the risks. I know people that are now, you know that there are 3 positions, right? I never see them individually. I always see them individually, or I ask them if I can see them individually, right? So these are 3 positions. So whatever you decide to do, you have to know what your position is. It doesn't matter. Nothing is better. No position is better than another. But you have to know which one is your position, because that has to be very, very clear from the beginning. You can't change positions midstream, because that's when you get in trouble. So if I have any recommendation, and I think I'm going to send an email to everyone to listen to this last part, because everyone would be interested in hearing this part about, it doesn't matter what your position is, as long as it's clear and you don't change it midstream. And as long as you have some form of this position in your informed consent that can be understood by what you want to do. So I say the risks outweigh, the benefits outweigh the risks. I say most people are concerned about revelations of affair or financial infidelity. And I'll say that under my license, I have to keep the secret if I'm going to see you individually, which is true. I can't make a revelation without their consent. I mean, that is true. That's the reality. If I'm going to take the risk of seeing them individually, I have to know that under my license, my allegiance is to the licensure requirement of confidentiality. So I cannot reveal if they don't want me to. So I can either convince them to reveal, or I can terminate the treatment. This is what and so about 2 years ago, I terminated treatment, but I did it in such an elegant way that they didn't know that I was terminating treatment. So he wasn't ending the affair, and he wasn't talking. He didn't want me to talk about it, and she was, interestingly, completely oblivious that he may be having an affair, which is the craziest thing in the world in this couple, because how could you not even wonder, considering what was going on? How could you not even wonder? So the way I frame it to her is, I don't remember anymore because I don't remember the details of the case, but I said something, I convinced her that she needed individual therapy to deal with the ways in which she lied to herself about what was important to her, something like that. And when she was able to be more attuned to what was going on with her, she would be better. And that was true. I wasn't making that up. That was totally true. So she went on to individual therapy, and so did he. I said, he had a history of, he had a father who had a history of affairs. And I somehow talked to him about his own self-delusion and his own self-talk about justifying lying, and his own, and how was, and what, that I thought he needed to talk to somebody about the legacy of his father. And he agreed. I mean, I framed it in a very, and it was true about, I just didn't want to deal with the secret. I didn't think I can continue. And I told him, I don't think you're going to make progress in the relationship unless you do this and unless you do that. Unless you can be more truthful with her, and unless you can be more truthful with yourself. That was how I framed it. And so I sent them off, and I got rid of them. But in most cases, there are issues of privacy more than secrecy. Most cases. It's about fear, it's about concern, it's about fear of impact, it's about conflict avoidance. It's about, so many, and so I push them and I help them, and usually that works. Did I answer the question?
That's all great and great food for thought and helpful, and especially thinking about what an informed consent would look like. I'd like to think about how to write that down for someone.
Well, I maybe mine is more clear than I think it is. I can send it to you if you want.
Sure, that would be great.
So my to-do is to share that paragraph in the informed consent about individual sessions.
Maybe you could put it in the toolkit.
Okay, I will do that.
Everybody can see it too.
Good idea. Okay. I want to spend, well, first of all, do you have any comments about, I want to ask you one more question, but I want to know if you have any comments about anything we've been talking about, any comments or questions about anything?
Yeah, I do. It just so happened that I told two couples that they each needed individual therapy before we could continue couples therapy this past week. And so I was concerned about that, but thank you for what you just said about that, because it kind of confirmed my judgment on that. So.
Right. I do. So thank you for that, Jacques. I do want to say though that I believe a lot of couples therapy is individual therapy in the presence of the partner, and that it is my job to do some of the individual work, and especially because I don't trust many of the individual therapists out there. Some of them do terrible work, and they are actually. So I'm sorry, I'm going to make it a little harder now. I say that sometimes my job is to do the individual therapy in front of the partner, and I worry about sending them out, in part because individual therapy can be destabilizing to a couple and distressing to a couple. And that's one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing I want to say is that I think of couples therapy as preparation for individual therapy. So it's sort of like a back and forth, so if I demand it before, then I'm not helping them. I mean, it's complicated. You can see how complicated it is. It's not a straightforward answer. I'm thinking about the couple I just told you about, where the alcoholic was paired up with a codependent. But those are not the only cases. I mean, sometimes there's trauma and sometimes there's reactivity, and you can't make a dent in it without EMDR or without individual therapy. So I feel like my work is to try, or they have narcissistic personality disorders, and I feel like I need to get them there, to get them to buy into it. Because the last thing a couple wants, or one member of the couple wants, is to feel like they're deficient in some way, right? That there's something wrong with them, that there's something that they need to do because they're not fit for whatever. So I need to do a lot of work to get them there. Go ahead.
I was wondering about the sequence that you talked about seeing a couple one session, then seeing each individual, then back to a couple session, and then 2 more individual sessions. Did I get that right?
Yeah. I can do it that way, or I can alternate an individual, joint an individual with one, an individual with the other, and then an individual with one, an individual, and then a joint. I just feel like it depends on how much CPR they need. If they're in great need of CPR, I don't want to leave a month between joint sessions.
Right.
So it just depends on what's going on. the one I was telling you, the codependent one, she wanted a month in between joint sessions because she bought into the idea of looking at the Al-Anon material that I sent her and needed some time to go to a meeting and seeing what, so she didn't want a joint session right away. In part prompted by my saying the joint session has to feel differently, because if it's going to be the same and you're going to be this angry and this reactive when he talks about the ways in which you heard him, it's not going to work. So part of it was a reaction to me. So it just depends on, I think every case is different. One size does not fit all, you're going to hear me say. I mean, this is why thinking and supervision and consultation is so important, because these cases are all very complicated and they don't,
Yeah.
it's not, there's not one formula.
Well, I'm wondering whether that kind of sequencing of couple and individual sessions could go on longer than just, you could do that for a half a year or something.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
Well, when you get to the point where you're doing the deeper work, it might be. So when you do the deep work, and in one of the months, you're going to hear me do the vulnerability cycle mapping. When you do the vulnerability cycle mapping, that requires a lot of individual work.
Yeah.
And so, you know, yeah, I think that's true. That's true. Unless you don't want to do it anymore, and you have somebody that you trust that you can send them to.
Yeah.
To do that piece of the work. And what I mean by that piece is the connection between the trauma and the and the triggering and the partner's triggering. That's what I mean by the deeper work. When you start connecting their individual trauma history and the ways in which they survived, and whether it's big T trauma or small t trauma, the ways in which they survived and the ways in which they get triggered now by their partners to go back to that survival strategy.
Right.
That's the deeper work that you do, and you can do it yourself or you can have somebody do it for you.
You know, I see a lot of men, and most of the majority of the men I see are referred to me by couples therapists. And for the most part, they're trauma victims from their childhood. And they absolutely have no skills at communicating with their partner, none. They freeze, they absolutely freeze. And so I'm really concerned about how to deal with this need for individual therapy in one or both members of the couple.
So I don't know if this is going to be helpful to you, but what I want to say from what I'm hearing you say is that the freezing is both a trauma reaction, it's a survival strategy, as you know.
Yeah.
But it's also brought up by their partners. The partners trigger it and get it so the partners oftentimes recreate the bad parent behavior. I mean, it's amazing how it fits. I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense, but
yeah, sure. Yeah.
So when the partner triggers the freeze response, then you have to work with the partner that is lowering the self-esteem of the man. So if it's a heterosexual couple and she's blasting and she's coming on strong and she's triggering the survival strategy of freezing, the work has to be with the couple, not just the individual, because you need to help her not lower her, another thing I have written in my forehead is that one of my jobs is to help each partner see how they affect the self-esteem of their partner. Again, remember, it's always about impact. always about impact. So what are you doing that triggers his freeze response? Yeah, he's freezing, you're right. And he doesn't have any skills. And that's the trauma response. But how are you triggering it? What are you doing to get him there? So it's always about impact. And once you can help her come on less strongly, do a soft startup, organize her thoughts, organize her wants, organize the ways in which she wants to talk. Once you can get her to do that, he will not freeze so much and he will be a little bit freer to take a minute to think about how he wants to respond. So it's, you know, you're working at both ends.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I said I had a question and I think I remember what it is. So my question is, this is again about the academy. So I am struggling with the following. When I'm recording sessions, and I started recording back in March, and so I have like 50 sessions, and I'm having a hard time figuring out which ones I'm going to put in the academy, right? There's one once a month. It has to be a good training session. It has to be a variety of presenting issues. It has to be showing something that's not easy to do. But in general, it's not going to be coinciding with the lessons. And that's what I'm struggling a little bit with. So for example, anyway, I don't know how else to explain it. That you know, maybe you'll see somebody who's doing stage 2, like that I'm going a little deeper with before I tell you how to do that in the lessons. I mean, so that's what I'm struggling with. I'm identifying a good, and I just wanted to say that, and I don't know if you have any reaction to it, that another way of saying it is, I have a solution-focused framework that I'm bringing up in month, I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 now. I think it's 5. But the session of that month will not have anything to do with that. The session of that month might be a 20th session with a couple that I'm doing a dialogue tool with, that I'm going deeper. I mean, so it's just, so maybe I'll get to the end of the year and I'll figure out how to organize it a little bit better. But right now, I guess this is what the main message I wanted to give you is, I hope you don't get too put off by the fact that the lessons are not necessarily related to the session. I don't know if I'm going to be able to change that in year 2.
I was just gonna say, I think that's okay, especially if it's known that, I mean, because I feel like being able to listen to a session is such a helpful thing. Like I really appreciate that. And the lesson is also helpful. And I think that they can both stand alone just fine.
Right,
mean,
they're independent. For now, they're independent. I don't know if I'm ever going to make them coincide, but for now, they're independent. So thank you. And I saw your gesture. Thank you for that, Monica. I saw your gesture, Carolyn. So.
Oh, also, yeah, I agree. And I also wanted to say, just having recorded myself and knowing how you know, heart-wrenching it is to listen to yourself on tape and sort pieces out. I feel like anything you're sharing is so helpful, and it's really, it's edifying, and it's good to know that it doesn't have to match, so that we're not looking for that, but it doesn't feel important to me that they match.
Maybe I'll say that in the email then. It doesn't match. Okay. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to leave you with that. I appreciate your presence. I'm trying to be as helpful as I can. Don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions.
Thank you, Sarah, very much.
Yes,
You're
thank you so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Stay
Bye.
well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Have fun. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye, everybody.